you for joining us today for Think Big with Michael Zellner, powered by Sleepy Z's Masonry. My guest for episode 147 is Frank Balkin. Welcome to the podcast today, Frank.
Thank you.
And it says that, at the bottom, it says they're Frank. So it's easy for everybody to know exactly who it is this time. He actually, I have to tell a funny story. When he first popped on, it had his wife's name. So I'm glad that he changed it. So no one's going to think it's Arlene. So that'll be out of the way. Before I get started today, I would like to thank our two new sponsors for Think Big with Michael Zellner, Roof and Nail and Buckley's Grill. Roof and Nail is one of the leading experts in insurance restorations. Co-owner Kelly Potter and his crews are preferred vendors of many mainstream insurance companies focused in the tri-state area of Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Not only can Roof and Nail provide you with the best evaluation on your roof to see if you qualify for insurance approval, but they also can provide you with a really competitive bid for any out-of-pocket expenses and any kind of jobs. If it's big job or small job, they got these guys, they do them all. So they're a really good company, very reputable, and I highly recommend Kelly Potter and Roof and Nail. Also, Buckley's Grill. Buckley's has been around here in Memphis for a little bit over 30 years. It's a little hidden gem for those seeking a really fantastic dining experience, and co-owners Jeff Urinelli and Ken Dick. They specialize in steaks and hospitality, like I said, for over 30 years. And it's a really upscale restaurant that boasts a contemporary atmosphere with a touch of classic elegance. And from the moment you step inside, you're greeted by a very friendly staff at the door and people that wait on you, amazing food, and these guys make you feel right at home. So I would like to thank those guys. So those are my two new sponsors starting in 2024 for the podcast. Tell you a little bit about Frank. Frank is the co-CEO of WPA, Worldwide Production Agency in West Hollywood, California, as of December of 2023. This past month, he celebrated 10 years with the company, where he started as a partner head of television. He has represented and worked with directors, producers, costume designers, cinematographers, editors, and production designers for 28 years. He started at just the age of 10 years old, so that's pretty amazing. He is originally from Memphis, and he graduated from White Station High School. And after high school, he headed way out west, in which, most people know the school by its initials. It's so well known, USC, University of Southern California. He received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Screenwriting and a minor in Sociology. In full transparency, as you hear us talk today, Frank and I have known each other since we were extremely little kids, going to preschool in kindergarten at the Memphis Jewish Community Center. And I can say categorically that even though it's been many years, and we talked about this a little bit off air before we came on, since he and I have seen each other in person, he is honestly one of the nicest guys I've ever known. And I'm excited to have him on today to hear about his current life now, and also catch up on some old times too. So once again, welcome, Frank. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
As I mentioned, you grew up in Memphis. What are a few memories, great memories, or maybe a couple of funny stories from your childhood that still stick out in your mind today when you think about them?
Oh gosh, we don't have enough hours for that. I had a good childhood. Some people did not. Like anyone, there were sad moments or whatever, but I had a great childhood, wonderful parents, many wonderful friends. Memories. For first and fourth grade, I went to a very open classroom school called A Learning Place, which is probably barely remembered by a lot of Memphians. And that was just a very creative environment, which made me appreciate education and not see education and schools as oppressive, which I think sadly too many people in our culture grow up seeing them as. I had great times in Fortis AZA in high school. I had wonderful times playing with my friends. I enjoyed being in Boy Scouts. A memory that actually ties into what we're going to talk about today. We were talking about before this, our mutual friend, Jonathan Epstein. When Jonathan and I were 5, 6 years old, I remember in my bedroom in Memphis pretending we were putting on the evening news. And we would take turns, one being the newscast, one being the cameraman. It's kind of funny. We both grew up working in different aspects of television and video.
That is really cool. And those that don't know Jonathan, Jonathan is one of the owners of Running Pony Productions here in Memphis, and they're a humongous company. Not only do they do production in Memphis, they production all over the country. So, and that's pretty awesome that you guys did that and ended up where you are today. That's pretty
And we're
cool.
still good friends and in touch.
That's great. You know, we grew up in obviously a totally different time than kids today. I remember Frank first seeing computers in classroom at Ridgeway and thinking, I'm never going to need one of those big things. I mean, today kids are in adults too. They're both glued to their smartphones and computer screens. I mean, you go out to a restaurant and many times there'll be a couple at a restaurant and also their
On
kids
their
and no
laptop
one's
or on their
talking.
phone the whole time.
Yeah, no one's talking. They're sitting there glued to their phone. And we used to have grew up. We had dinner at the dinner table with our families, and so
And talk.
and talk. Right. I talk about it a lot and say so many children today, lack the communication skills we developed when we were younger because many of them, have to rarely talk to people much anymore at all. And I think that has made a lot of people we don't have as much empathy today, and it's also turned there's a lot more narcissism, especially as you see on social media. What are your thoughts on that?
Agree with you that conversation is becoming a bit of a lost art. I think all the technology you mentioned has its place. For example, we're zooming on a computer right now, but
Sure.
I do think phone calls and actual dialogue conversation with someone has benefits. There's a lot of nuance you lose in an email or a text, and I think in person is great. I really do. When COVID hit, I had a hard time adjusting to life on Zoom. I'm a very sociable person. I can entertain myself. I do like to read. I like to meditate. I sometimes hike solo. But in general, I like a lot of human interaction. So I was thinking, I was doing a lot of walks with friends. What can I do with other people? There's lots of ways that Zoom and technology make life fun and interesting, create opportunities. I do like that now. I had a couple of friends who lost a parent early on in COVID, and I wouldn't necessarily buy an airplane ticket to go to Florida for this person's funeral, but I would participate in the Zoom funeral.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of wonderful usage. Our Temple men's club started a Zoom poker game, and once
I
a month
saw
I
that on
still
your
go on.
page.
I don't even play poker. I just like the guys, so I go on with a glass of wine and
How do you
schmooze on
guys do
Zoom.
that on Zoom?
I'll find out for you because I actually don't play in the game. I go on and schmooze, but there's 10, 12 guys who play 2 games of poker
That's
every
so
the
cool.
first Tuesday of every month. And it's a tradition we kept up. We have gone back to some in-person programming too. I'll tell you something funny. So when COVID first hit, because like I said, I do sort of crave human contact, I was putting together Zoom gatherings like my college buddies, Fortis members and Shea girls, my family. Every time I did these, 6 or 7 people would say, sure, Saturday at 3 p.m. And there'd always be 1 or 2 people who'd say, I love you. I'm happy you guys are doing this. I Zoom 8 hours a day at work.
Right.
I don't want to do a Zoom on the weekend. So I get that too. I was fortunate that my work never necessitated that much Zoom per week. Maybe at the height of it, I was Zooming 4 or 5 meetings a week on Zoom, 5, 6 hours, something like that. So on a weekend, I still enjoyed it. And I just find it's a fun way to keep in touch with people. But it shouldn't replace, none of this should replace actual conversations and
Right.
in person when possible.
Yeah, because I mean, if we wanted a date back then, we had to call somebody on the phone or we had to
Yes.
ask them in person. I mean, we could not,
Yes.
we didn't have any other options. I mean, it was just,
Yes.
there wasn't all this stuff. And like you said, I've always said, as great as technology is, crazy people have the world at their fingertips. You know,
Mm-hmm.
with all the crazy, people that cults and
Right.
all that kind of stuff that and it's just, but the good thing are things like this, being
Right.
able to, like you said, and God, I would love to own Zoom or have stock in Zoom.
It's interesting because in my business, a lot of meetings that clients will have with producers about jobs are now on Zoom. The loss is, especially if it's a multi-person interview, you can't always read the body language of everybody.
Yeah.
The plus is though, and I try to embrace this too, is that you do often get a glimpse into someone's home. And sometimes the client will say, Oh, I found out they're a dog person. I love dogs. Or they collect Native American art, or they collect comic books too. Sometimes you can learn about someone's personal life through Zoom, and that's not all bad.
Right. Exactly. It's funny you said that because we were talking about the last person I interviewed, for, Days of Our Lives star Teo Pingles, and he was behind me and he was asking me about, being such a huge Rocky movie fan. And I was telling him about how that happened. And I have to once, since this podcast, I believe it was the day before yesterday, Carl Weathers, who played Apollo Creed, passed away,
Yeah, I saw
thankfully,
that.
peacefully in his sleep.
Yes.
But one thing I say is that if that's the way to go, if you're going to go, you want to go peacefully in your sleep.
Yeah.
And he made it way past round 15. He made it to round 76.
Right.
So he was 76 years old when he passed away. But what a great actor in person, and everything I've read about that guy online from all different walks of life, everybody said he was such a joy to be around. So he actually was one of my favorite person. He was the perfect person to play the character of Apollo Creed.
Sure.
So, just being a big Rocky
Yeah.
fan, as you see it behind me there, just like you
Yeah.
said, you find out things about people, some and some you didn't know.
True.
White Station and Ridgeway were, two of the top public schools back in our time.
Mhm.
And you went to White Station, I went to Ridgeway. Do you have any teachers that you remember from high school that had a positive impact on your life?
Oh, 100%. Um, I went to MUS 8th, ninth, and 10th, and then went to White Station. Well, I'd gone there in 7th. I went back 11, 12. At MUS, there were a couple of teachers. Mr. Terry Shelton, who's my 8th grade English teacher, no longer with us, but made me into an excellent writer, kicked my butt on punctuation and sentence structure and stuff like that. Also made me really appreciate the written word in terms of literature. Fantastic teacher. And then also Andy Saunders, who was I had him for science, but he was primarily a speech and acting teacher. He was fantastic. We actually ended up a couple of years later acting in a play together at Theater Memphis.
Very cool.
But the number one teacher was at White Station, and people who know me will not be surprised. Mr. Goff Wheat, who was my math teacher, huge impact in my life. I don't remember that much of the trigonometry and calculus. Where he made an impact was time management. Classes were 55 minutes, and it felt like to me some of the other teachers would sort of screw around taking the roll and whatever, and take 8 minutes to get into work. Mr. Wheat would boom, 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 call the roll. He would make a joke now and then, but he was trying to fit as much learning as he could into 55 minutes, and that really made an impact. I saw him, not my last trip to Memphis, but maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I told him this. He said, "Well, that's great, son. What about the math?" And I had to be honest that I don't remember that much of the calculus and trig, but Mr. Wheat made an impact. He gets quoted in my office.
That's funny. I had Mr. Rainey at Ridgeway. He was the AP English teacher for senior year. And he passed away a few years ago also. And I remember telling him online several years ago, I still remember the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, the first 18 lines in Old English,
That's really friggin' impressive.
and he was like, and he sort of was like, well, what about this? And what, sort of the same thing as you went through. There was a teacher at White Station, geometry teacher, Miss Goodwin, and
Mm-hmm. She's my homeroom teacher.
she was my tutor for
Okay.
geometry, and I used to go to her house because that was the only math I wasn't good at. And
Okay.
I remember going to her house the night before a test. And of course, same school, city schools back then, we used the same exact book, same standardized test.
Right.
She would actually take the standardized tests I was taking the next day. And, that's what I would do the night before work. And I would say to her, I go, I'm going to be taking this exact test tomorrow. And she says, yeah, but you still got to know how to work out the problems, which is true. But I ended
Yeah.
up getting, a B in geometry, and I probably would have gotten probably a low C if it hadn't been for her and those tests. So I still have fond memories of her. Very nice woman.
Yeah. I never had a class with her, but she was my homeroom teacher the 2 years I was there.
Interesting. You know,
Yeah.
we both know people who went to college all over the country. Many stayed home, went to Memphis State like I did. A lot went to schools like Tennessee, Alabama, Indiana, Georgia, Texas, and many more. I can't remember anyone that I personally know who decided to go all the way to LA and attend USC. What were the main reasons that led you to that decision?
Very simple. Excellent film school. And they were the only place I found at the time that had an undergraduate degree in screenwriting. I in high school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. My parents were very, very passionate about their kids going to college. And also, maybe they didn't say this verbally, but I did feel they wanted me to have a direction, to try to go in with a major, or at least a direction. And I realized I'd always loved movies and TV shows, and I'd always noticed the stories and how they unfolded. Back up to, I'd always noticed the credits. Now a lot of the networks and streamers squeeze the credits, which I hate, because I always grew up saying, "Oh, Sherwood Schwartz, oh, that's a person." Sid and Marty Krofft. There were people who made these shows that I loved. Rod Serling. So I started thinking partway through high school that what I wanted to try to do was to write movies and TV shows, and USC was one place that had an undergraduate program. I applied, I got in, and I also felt like so much of the film business was in LA. It was likely I'd end up here at some point anyway. Why not at least, lay the groundwork, start meeting people, start seeing how the town was laid out.
Right. I mean, pretty much back then, I would say almost everything was probably LA or New York in the United States. I mean, for the most part,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
and
And
everything.
still is, as far as decisions being made. I mean, they shoot in Atlanta and Memphis, New Orleans, all kinds of places, but the decision making is primarily LA
Yeah.
or New York
Well, that's easy.
or
And
LA.
I had a feeling that was going to be one of the main decisions that led you there, but that's still, that's a pretty amazing thing to go all the way out there as a, 18-year-old kid. So,
I'll admit, first couple of days I was a little scared, a little
yeah,
skittish. What have I got myself into? I did end up with a wonderful roommate freshman year. That helped. Made some nice friends really quick first. So I was a little nervous.
well, obviously it worked out, which is wonderful. There was a night during your first few weeks at USC that obviously made a huge difference in your life. The screenwriters from the huge hit movie Stand By Me spoke after a screening of their film. Where
Yeah.
did your mind go after hearing them talk that night as far as your career is concerned?
It probably helped cement that I was in the right place for me, because obviously in Memphis I could see great films, but the opportunity to hear people in person speak about them was going to be quite limited. So here was two people who made a film that I saw for the first time that night and loved, and could hear them talk about. That was kind of exciting. I mean, it still is one of my favorite films.
And when I see it, it probably, every, I'd say couple of weeks, it's on some channel. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing thinking about that movie is 38 years old. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just unbelievable how thinking
I
about that.
remember maybe the next summer, I was traveling with my parents, and I met a couple who didn't like the film. They didn't like the film because of all the bad language the little boys were using. They said, "That's not how little boys talk." I said, "That's how this little boy and his friends, we dropped some bad words here and there."
Yes, we did all
One
the
of the reasons I
time.
liked it, I thought it was realistic.
Absolutely. And it was very realistic. Ron Parker was one of your teachers at USC, and he said, quote, "There's a role for each of you in this business. Some of you might become agents or producers or something in an industry you haven't even thought of," unquote.
Yeah.
What did Ron mean to you?
Well, that quote kind of sums it up. So I majored in screenwriting, and like anything else one does in life, there's positives and there's negatives. We had some teachers who were very inspiring, some teachers who were less so. Before Ron came in, there was a well-known screenwriter who was supposed to teach our class, who allegedly quit because he read all of our synopses for the scripts we were going to write, and allegedly they made him physically ill, so he quit. So all these 19 and 20, mostly 19, 20, and 21-year-olds, that's kind of a blow to our self-esteem. As
Sure.
writers, you're already a sensitive soul, and here's someone with credentials saying your work sucks. By the way, not that I'm the greatest writer of all time. We had some damn talented people in that class. So I question if that actually happened, and if so, his judgment and abilities. Anyway, he quit, and the woman who ran our program, Margaret Maring, brought in two different teachers and split the class in half. And I had Ron, who I've stayed in touch with, and Ron did say that. He looked around the room and he said, "You're all planning to be feature film screenwriters. Statistically, that's not going to happen. But if some of you are open to being a producer, an agent, a location manager, there are roles in this business if you can maybe cast a little bit wider of a net." And that was really good advice. I never thought back then I'd be an agent. I thought of agents as business people. I thought I was an artist, but I was the one in that class who became an agent. But yeah, that was a watershed moment. He also was just a teacher who approached things in a more positive way, even beyond that one conversation. He met with us one-on-one about our scripts. And I remember my script had strengths and weaknesses, but he tried to be empowering in how he taught.
I can't I can't even stress how important that is. And that makes me think of, when I was in college, I sold Cutco knives and
Yep.
then became a manager, here for 5 years. And it was all positivity and building people up and the one-on-one talking with people and the impact that my managers had on me, that I used to be shy and a little bit timid, that brought me out of my shell. And to have a teacher like that that spends time with you, you knew that guy cared about you.
He did, and he took the time to get to know the students as individuals. He was quite special. We were
That's
very
all.
lucky.
That's awesome.
He
You
actually, at the time, was more of a producer than a writer, but after that, he became really a screenwriter and has gone on to write big miniseries and all kinds of exciting stuff.
Very neat. You've talked about working in production, post production, story development, and foreign sales at several entertainment industry companies early on in your career. I know you, and I'm sure your work ethic is just incredible. And you paid your dues early on, setting the groundwork for where you are today, Frank. Tell us about some of the things that you did, and what were some of the most important things that you learned about the entertainment business, early on in your career.
I think, like any industry, it's all about collaboration, how you work with people. The challenge about the film industry is that even the best film school experience can't really prepare you. In film school, we made student films, but no matter how well you work with your fellow crew members on a student film, it's a different dynamic when you're working with professionals who have to put food on the table. I I'd like to think I was generally a diplomatic person. I'd like to think I read the room well, but one of my early jobs, I made a misstep, and to be honest, the producer who I made the misstep with, can I say the word asshole? I can
Yes.
say that, right? He was a terrible human being who eventually got a karmic payback that I wouldn't have wished on him. Actually, it was so bad,
Wow.
but it was a misstep just because I was new to this and I didn't understand how things worked. I just said kind of the wrong thing. It wasn't I wasn't yelling at anybody or anything, but I just didn't choose my words well. Well, we all make those. There's just mistakes you make as you come up through the ranks and you learn to do better. I will tell you, I've always felt strongly about trying to help other young people not make the same mistakes. I'll tell you a cute story. So it's gonna be kind of a long story. I'll try not to make it too
It's
long.
okay.
My senior year of college, a friend of the family got me an interview. Well, it wasn't really an interview, it was a meeting with a literary agent. And I was meeting with them partly to maybe read my scripts and also maybe there'd be a job after I graduate. This is my senior year. And I went in wearing a suit and tie. And the man I met with was wearing a button down and khakis. And during the course of the meeting, he said, "You're so dressed up. We're kind of more casual around here." So what I internalize is agencies are casual. 6 months later, I graduate from film school and I signed with a personnel agency that sends me for an interview at Creative Artists, the largest agency in the business,
Yeah.
to be an assistant to someone there. I didn't wear a wife beater and jeans. I wore a button down, a sport coat, and khakis. I walk in, every guy in there is in a tie. And no one said anything, but I'm sure one reason I didn't get the job, I wasn't wearing a tie. Flash forward 6 years later, I'm an agent at a smaller agency. It's an agency that does have a dress code. You don't have to wear a tie, but I'd say each day probably half of them wore ties. And the owner of the agency had to personally screen potential assistants. I interviewed this guy from Memphis. I didn't know him in Memphis, but turned out we had some common ground. He came in and he was not wearing a tie. I actually took my tie off, gave it to him, and sent him down to meet the boss because I knew without a tie, he'd get vetoed. With a tie. And he got the job and ended up doing just fine.
Sweet. That's
So
awesome.
where I can, yes, I made a lot of mistakes. We all make mistakes, but I think it is good when you can help the next generation head off a potential mistake.
Well, that is a very good story. So, and he was from Memphis too. I mean, that makes it even a greater
Well,
story.
here's what happened. So I was looking for an assistant. So I think I emailed or called 7 or 8 people I knew around the business. And someone I knew at Sony, her assistant knew this guy, and he sent me a resume. And his first few jobs were in Memphis. And I called him, and he had not only grown up in Memphis, I believe he had gone to MUS like ninth and 10th and then switched to White Station just like me, just 5 years later. So we had some common ground.
There's so many people try to get into your industry in one way or the other. And, not everybody can make it. And we all know that, stories of most actors and people that go out to LA, they're waiting tables in between until hopefully they get a big shot. And it's such a tough industry to make it. I mean, even today, there's so much more out there, obviously with streaming shows and things like that.
But I think there's more and more little girls and boys growing up wanting to pursue it. That's what makes it even
yeah,
tougher.
yeah. And it's such a tough industry. And, we have a few friends in common that are in the business, and it's tough. I mean, you could be one year, you could be working a ton, and then the next year you're not working near as much.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so that has to be very, very difficult. And stick to itiveness, and you have to be able to survive financially and stuff like that. So it's not, there are some people that have it handed to them, maybe that, obviously, that have family and people like that,
Yep.
that they have a little bit of an up on somebody else. But most people have to really work their butt off to get it. I was reading recently, that was it Brad Pitt was roommates. Who was he roommate with? I forget who the story I was reading, but they did not like they were living together in the 80s. And
Right.
they had like a contest to see how long no either of them could not take a shower. It was like pretty gross. But then Brad Pitt got
Were they
his.
trying to save money on water? Was
I
that the
don't know
agenda?
what the heck it was.
They're struggling. I'm trying to figure
Right.
out what the
But Brad Pitt ended up getting, I think, what was the 1991 movie that he was in that was a big hit? It was,
Gilbert Grape.
no, not,
No, that was DiCaprio.
yeah. Yeah, I forget what it was. A
Brad
scene
Pitt in
with
'91.
it was with Julia Roberts, I believe. He had a big scene, a romantic scene without a shirt on, and that ended up being like a big break for him. But I don't remember the name of the movie. But it just so many people. I mean, they struggle.
There's a
Um,
joke in Hollywood that some people it takes 20 years to become an overnight success.
yeah,
And then some people, I went to film school with John Singleton. He wrote some really good scripts in film school and graduated and went right into directing Boys in the Hood. What I will give him credit for, there were 3 or 4 people in film school with me who had pretty early success. He was one of them. And most of them, what they did, they made films outside of what we were assigned to make. There were classes we had to make 5 short films, whatever. But John and a couple other people, James Gray was one, were always making films, like on spring vacation or summer break, whatever. They were grabbing a camera. So they were learning to work those muscles and refine their skills.
it was Jason Priestley and Brad Pitt. That's who was living together
I'm trying
from
to think what the movie would
90210.
be.
Yeah, and they
Okay.
both got their big break right at the early 90s, and everything like that. But they, were struggling. I remember reading
Right.
the article and talking about, having to wait tables and, it's make money until hopefully, you get that break. But I have to imagine for so many people that don't make it to where they
Right.
want to make it, it has to be very difficult for them.
Most of the men and women I represent, it took many, many years of accruing credits. For example, most of the cinematographers we represent didn't graduate high school or college and become a cinematographer. They started in a much lower position on a camera crew and worked their way up. Some of them, a lot of them did 2 tracks. Maybe they would work for established cinematographers in whatever capacity, and then on the weekends shoot a freebie short film for a friend where they got the cinematographer credit. But most of them, it took years, if not decades, to get to where they were hoping to get to.
Yeah, when I was interviewing Alan Blomquist, he told me the same. He started at a lower level, had to, pay his dues, do little things like that. He did whatever he had to do to get to where he
Right.
was, and then it ended up paying off and became a very successful executive producer. So definitely. You said, quote, I went to film school like many people in the business. And when I was there, I never thought I was going to be an agent. You mentioned a little bit about this. I thought I would be someone who had an agent. I just thought of agents as businessmen and businesswomen. I thought myself as an artist. I fell into my first agent job 5 years after film school on a total fluke, unquote. If you could elaborate a little bit more about, thinking of yourself as just an artist and
Sure.
tell us about that total fluke getting that job.
Sure. So I, in film school, did think of myself as an artist. I did want to make a living, but I didn't see myself as primarily a business person. I saw myself as creative. What I didn't know then, and maybe right out of school, is that I'm a stability person. And I don't think I was ever designed to be a freelancer where maybe one year you make a lot of money and the next year less money, and then the next year zero money, and then that's not how I was built even at 22 years old. I worked the first few years exactly like you said. You quoted it from something else that I did whatever entry level job. I worked for someone who created a really shitty kids TV show in the 70s and was selling the rights to it over and over again in the 1990s. I worked in post production. I worked at Santa Clarita Studios as a stage manager. I temped a couple of talent agencies, and then I got my first permanent job working as a TV movie producer's assistant, and that was a great job for a couple of years. And then I went to work for another producer for about a year that wasn't so great. And then a friend and mentor of mine, who's still a friend and mentor, called me up. He had heard about an opening at a small talent agency doing half literary and half production. And he said, "What do you know about this place? Would you be interested?" And I was thinking, what? I don't really have the background. But to be totally transparent, I was tired of being an assistant.
Right.
I wanted to be an executive. And I thought, if I can possibly get this job, then maybe after a year or two, I'll go back to doing something more creative as a producer or something. But I ended up really enjoying it. I found, you've probably seen this in interviews with me too. I described the job as 1/4 salesperson, 1/4 accountant, 1/4 attorney, and 1/4 psychotherapist. Clients need those in different proportions and at different times of the year and different points in their career. I also feel fortunate because I feel like I work with the smartest men and women in the entertainment business. I feel like I work with smart people that I learn a lot from, I'm inspired by. I work alongside smart people that I'm inspired by. I have no desire to go back to the creative side. Every several years, I'll have an idea for a book or a short story or script. I'll write out 3 pages and say, "Yeah, this isn't great. I'll stick with what's working." I still appreciate good writing. I read a lot, but yeah, that was the wrong path. But sometimes you don't know what the right path is till it presents itself. You know,
Absolutely.
what's interesting is my dad probably doesn't like when I say I got the job as a fluke, because I think my dad and I sometimes debate. He thinks luck doesn't exist. You have to make your own luck. I think there is an element of luck in the world. Who meets who when, what happens to whom. I met that one person. He happened to get the call from the agency that he was not interested in working at. He had talked to me a week before, so I was fresh on his mind. I think there's an element of luck there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And luck that that agency, even though I didn't have background as an agent, took a chance on me.
Right. You know,
So,
after working for others for several years, you talked about 2001, you become co-head of physical production at Paradigm Talent Agency. You were there for a little bit over 13 years.
yeah.
Tell us about, you know, the company, how it got started, you know, maybe some of the people that you got to work with, and what you enjoyed most about what you were doing there
Paradigm or WPA?
at Paradigm.
So
Is
Paradigm
it
was formed
Paradigm?
by
Is it Paradigm?
Paradigm.
Okay.
Paradigm was formed by a merger of 4 agencies in the early 90s. When I came in, they did not have a physical production department. They had a strong literary department, a strong acting department. I believe they had tried production at one point in the earlier years, and that person didn't work out for whatever reason. They brought me over from another agency. Um, it was interesting because I'd always been curious what it was like to work at a bigger place. I It was a bigger platform. The bigger agency name was beneficial sometimes. There are all kinds of pluses and minuses to it. I will say that when the WPA opportunity came up, the opportunity to be an owner was exciting, and the opportunity to be involved in the visioning of a company was exciting. Paradigm was so large that it's not that I was neglected. It's just that there were many, many leaders in different departments. So
Sure.
my vision was not my thoughts on visioning were a small piece of the fabric. So it was kind of exciting to be part of a company where I could have a little bit more impact. I will say, not just about Paradigm, but about other agencies I worked at, the least enjoyable part of my agent career was when a few times I was forced to work with individuals that were not pleasant to work with. So it was an attraction to come to WPA as an owner where I could have some input and, in theory, never be forced to work with someone I didn't like.
Makes a lot of sense. And you joined them, I believe it was January of 2014.
Yep.
So you made that
10 years
change,
ago, 2 weeks ago.
right? You're making that change. And what were some of your responsibilities? You know, I know, you know, you're part owner as a partner there.
Mhm.
What that you were doing there that maybe was a little bit different than Paradigm?
Sure. Like I said, being responsible somewhat for the vision of the company. for big picture decisions, hirings. At one point, we decided to expand our physical office space. We opened an office in England. We now have a presence in New York, talking about some of that global expansion stuff. We hired a literary agent a year ago. That's something I was very involved with. I think being a part of the big picture thing appeals to me, but I don't want to lose sight of the day-to-day stuff. I really enjoy day-to-day talking to clients. I
And
enjoy that clients call me when they're having a bad day at the job they're on, or if they're wrestling between two job opportunities. I like that day-to-day stuff a lot too.
and just like I said, you and I haven't seen each other in over 30 years. Thankfully, we've been able to keep up with each other on Facebook, and every once in a while, I get we'll talk about that later, a little funny message. It just pops up on my screen. And but knowing you, and because I remember really well you and your personality and your character, and I would think that you kick butt as an agent because you're genuine. And that's not always the way it is in that industry, and whether it's the entertainment or sports industry, it's just not always the way it is.
That is true. I think a lot of agents work from a place of fear. I try to give my clients straight answers. One thing that's tough when you're an agent is sometimes a client gets negative feedback. Either they go on a meeting and the feedback is negative, or they get let go off the job. I tell the clients what I've heard. I might soften it a bit. I one time represented a production designer, and he thought this one producer was a fan of his, and she said to me, "He's a fucking asshole." I didn't quote that, but I did say, "We have to take her off your resume. She thinks you're really difficult to work with." He needed to know she wasn't a fan. A lot of agents are wusses and won't even say that much. A lot of agents make every client think everybody loves them. You're not doing them any services.
Right.
It's not helping them to mistakenly think someone's a fan who's not, and to not know if there's areas for improvement. That one case I was talking about, I don't know the specifics, so I couldn't go back to the client and say, "Well, she thinks you're not a good production designer because of X, Y, and Z." But sometimes you do get specific feedback. We've had some clients where people say they're great at the artistic part of the job, but they're really rough on the people who report to them. That's good feedback to have.
Sure. And there's a
Sometimes
lot.
they take it well, sometimes they don't, but I'm going to relay it.
Yeah. And, if they want to be successful at what they're doing, they take that feedback. They might not like it, but then you can work on things. I mean, change is hard in
Right,
anything we do. But if you
right.
really want to you listen to the people like you that have been successful at it and say, okay, I need to make a few changes, and let's listen and do that. And that way I can become successful.
Like you said about being genuine, one difference between LA and Memphis that I've never made peace with. In Memphis, if someone invites you to a party and you can't go, you say, "Hey, thank you, I've got something that night." Most people in Los Angeles, not necessarily natives, but most people in Los Angeles, many people in Los Angeles, you invite them to a party, they say, "I'll be there." And there's no connection between that and reality. I remember my senior year of film school, 5 of us were going to go to a screening at the New Beverly Cinema. 4 friends and me. I showed up. None of the 4 showed up. None of the 4 had a concrete reason, like I had a flat tire, I was sick, my dog died. It was all, "Oh yeah, I just didn't go." I can't do that to people. And if someone invites me to something, I don't think I'm hurting them to say, "Hey, thank you, I've got something that night."
Right. Yeah, I
But
agree.
someone here that I actually adore, actually he's not here now, but someone I went to school with and have stayed in touch with, he lives somewhere else now. He said to me, "That's burning a bridge to say no to their party." No, it's not. Not if you're not going to go.
Right.
So
Southern
this is when you use the word
hospitality.
genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said, quote, "We try very hard to regularly stay in contact with clients. I think one of the things that we try to do to distinguish ourselves is there are agents out there where it's all about the glory of the sign. They spend a lot of time trying to lock in a new client, and then they sign that
Yes.
person, book him or her on a TV series, and don't call them again until it's over. We tend to call, text, email, visit our clients throughout the project and the year," unquote. I love that. And I think that's huge. And how important do you believe, going about the genuine approach we were just talking about, how important do you believe that has been to the success of your company and what you do?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think I stand by everything I said there because I meet potential clients who will say, "Oh, I'm with X agency. They booked me on this job, and then I didn't hear from them until the job was over, and I'm calling them looking." I try to stay. Well, there's a few reasons. It's not just being a good person. There's also a strategy to it. I feel like if a client's on a job, you shouldn't assume he or she is happy. What if they're on a job and they hate the job?
Yeah.
What if they're on a job and there's things they like and things they don't like? You want as much information as you can to help find the next job for that person.
Interesting.
I also, part of me is just an eternal film student. I like hearing their stories from the set. I like hearing, oh, we were going to shoot this on location, but instead we built this. So the way I find it really interesting. And it also gives you, staying in regular touch gives you more specifics to help sell the client. Sometimes when I go to set, which I do like to do, I haven't been able to do as much with the COVID of it all. They cut back on visitors.
Yeah.
But sometimes you learn a little tidbit because, you know, 6 months later, you're pitching a client and they'll say, we need a costume designer who's good with kid actors. It's so much nicer to be able to be specific and say, oh, I was on the set of the Michael Zellner show and you should talk to so and so because they have this problem with, as opposed to just saying, yeah, they're good with kids.
Yeah.
You can pitch with more specificity and you learn what the client likes. And another reason I like to go to the in-person set visits is often you meet the people they work for. So when I'm calling that person in a year to pitch clients for their next show, I'm not just some schmuck with an email. I'm a warm body.
Yep.
Hopefully a warm body they like.
Yeah. You know, one thing that people don't do today besides that as much is very few people do handwritten thank you notes anymore. You know, little small things like that.
Right.
And so I said, you know, I was talking to my sister about this and I said, you know, I just got printed up, you know, I just started my new masonry business in the last year.
Right.
And I was telling you, use the name Sleepy Z's because I, you know, branded it really well from the mattress business. And so I got handwritten thank you notes printed up because I said, I'm going to send those out to people because it, once again, it differentiates me from a lot of people. Plus it's genuine. And I do think people, you know, appreciate that a little bit more than just an email. Thank you. Not that that doesn't mean anything, but you know, it's just a little bit different.
A lot of our clients after a job interview will send an email because usually they're making decisions very fast. So the client wants to be sure the email, the thank you note gets to the person in timely fashion.
Sure.
I do have one client who, if he has more of a general meeting, sometimes a studio will take a meeting with a producer just to know about him or her for the future. If it's a general meeting, he does that for that exact reason. He does a handwritten thank you note because he knows other people send an email, but it makes him stand out in a little way. I'm a big fan of thank you notes after meetings. I always say sometimes it's the icing on the cake. They're thinking about hiring one of two people. Have them think, okay, you're both brilliant DPs. You're a nice human being on top of it.
I like that.
I'm a
Who are
big fan of
some of
thank you notes.
some of your clients you've worked with in the past or currently work with on some shows that
I want to be careful there because I'm afraid if I start naming clients, then I offend the ones I don't name. So I want to be careful there.
okay. Is there any upcoming projects that you could tell us about that you're going to be doing?
Oh, there's tons of exciting projects. I mean, I don't want to hit every one of them. I'm excited about Tracker next week, which one of our clients, Steve Beers, was a producer on. I'm excited about Echo, the new Marvel series that we have a couple of editors on, Amelia Alwarden and Shelby Hall. I'm excited about, oh gosh, I could just go on and on, but I'm just afraid if I name six
No,
or
I
seven or eight,
understand.
then there's
I know you had
25
somebody
people who
that
are like,
was on
why
Walking
wasn't
Dead,
my
I
show named?
believe. That
Pardon me?
did you have somebody that was on Walking Dead or one of those shows?
I've had a few over the years. Yeah, Hunter Bai was the editor, and we've had a couple others, Shahid Kassim and a few other people, and DP in the early years. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's so fun. I have, you know, our mutual friend, David Kaplan Calloway, who, you know, as an actor, he said that, you know, in the acting world, like if you see another actor and you're on a set, he goes, and he's worked with a lot of famous people. I mean, some big time stars, you know,
Right.
and everything. And he said when he was around Denzel Washington or people like that, you don't go up to him and like, oh, I'm a fan of yours. I think you're just a great. He goes, you have to act like you've been there. And you know what I mean? Because if you do all that, they're going to be like, because he worked with Ethan Hawke in the remake of the Magnificent Seven.
I remember he did that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Vincent D'Onofrio and him worked closely together, and then Ethan remembered him, and when he was doing an independent project, he called David to be on it with
Right.
him because he enjoyed it. But he said it just, you know, when he was with those guys, it wasn't like, oh my God, these are just some big stars. He just realized that you have to act like you've been there before.
There is that balance. I mean, it's fine to tell them how much you like their work, but if you're too much of a fanboy or fangirl you don't come across as a professional. One thing, a trick that I learned a long time ago is often when I meet a filmmaker or actor or comedian, whomever that I've always been a fan of, I'll try to refer to something that's not as well known. You know, if you meet Tom Hanks, instead of referring to Big or, you know, Philadelphia or some film he hears about all the time, think of something more obscure because he probably doesn't get that every day.
I bet he rarely gets people that talk to him even about bosom buddies.
Maybe.
Yeah, because it's so long ago, so many people weren't even born when that show came out. So yeah, that's I think that's a great approach. Quote, I think if you are passionate about filmmaking, the best thing to realize is you always bring your A game to every job, unquote. In other words of yours. What does bringing your A game mean to you?
Sure. I have met individuals over the years who think if they're doing a job they're not excited about, it's okay to give a B effort. I would say, especially as a filmmaker, don't do that. Even if you're shooting some low budget thing as a favor for a friend, someone's going to remember you. Have them remember you as the person who kicked butt. I've had Most recently, I've had generally great assistants. I've had some agency assistants who didn't really want to work with me in that capacity after a few days. It wasn't me personally, it's that being an agent assistant wasn't what they aspired to be. So they kind of gave a half-assed effort. Wrong move, because not only have I, but other people that I've worked with have referred people for all kinds of jobs. If someone's paying you, they deserve 100% of your efforts. When I was in college, I worked a couple of times at Memphis Comics. It was a minimum wage job. Now, granted, I'm a big comic book fan, but I tried to do what I could to help the owners make money. If someone was reading this comic book and I knew this artist also did this, hey, you might want to try Heroes for Hope. This artist has 2 pages in here. I think someone's paying you anything, whether it's a small salary or big, they deserve 100% of effort.
And like I said, we grew up in a time that was different. Our parents had good work ethic and worked hard. And I know you busted your butt to get to where you are today. Is the generation, because you see a lot of young people coming out of college today that
Right.
are, I guess, I don't know if it's the Gen Z or whatever it's called. Is
Right.
sometimes the attitude a little bit different? Like, maybe they don't want to work as hard. Some people, because they feel like that, hey, I don't want to do that.
You can't, necessarily issue a blanket statement. I've had some who disappointed me. There was one situation, it was, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. I needed an assistant and I emailed 20 contacts. Someone wrote back and not only sent a resume, but wrote this whole page glowing recommendation to this person and said, they're this and this and this, like everything you could possibly want to hear. Person came in, did a good interview, but very quickly decided that their goal in life was to be a writer. This was not a job that furthered their career as a writer. So they gave me kind of a half-assed uh, thing. And to be honest, I was on the verge of firing that person when they took another job. And it's sad because I can also give you a list of alumni who've worked with me who've either gone to agent jobs, or 2 weeks ago, Arlene and I had dinner with a former assistant who's an executive at Amazon and doing tremendously there in development and programming. I'm happy to help people out, but I do expect 100%. If someone's paying you anything, give 100% or don't take the job.
I agree. I know the company you're working with, and the owner of is big. And just like you mentioned, you guys are now in the United Kingdom, and you just mentioned, expanding to New York. I believe on the television side that you work with Brian Goldberg and Katie Adams. Tell us a little bit about them and anybody else that maybe you want to share with.
They're both fantastic. I don't want to go too far with either because our whole agency has
Sure, and I understand. Yeah.
tremendously talented individuals, and I don't want to slide anybody. Brian's an agent who's worked with me since the Paradigm days, and you were talking about work ethic. No human being on earth has a better work ethic than Brian Goldberg. He outpaces me by a whole lot. And
Wow.
Katie Adams is fantastic. She joined us about a year and a half ago, and has a tremendous empathy for clients. And what's huge working as an agent's assistant or coordinator is being that kind voice when I can't hop on the phone so that they know they're a priority.
See, this tells me more about you that I already know. I mean, that you don't want to offend people and hurt people's feelings. So that's why, when I ask you about clients or ask you about people you work with, you're such a genuine guy. You don't want to leave anybody out. So you're careful of what you say because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Like if I don't want to leave them out. And there's not everybody is that way. They're just not. I
What
mean,
I say is, I think every agent in our agency is extraordinarily talented.
right.
That we have slight differences in style sometimes. The analogy I often use is we're kind of like a rock band where people play different instruments or sing with different voices, but we're playing the same music. Different agents have different strengths, but good work ethics, passionate about filmmakers, empathetic team. Yeah, we got a good group. There was a good reason for me to make the move to WPA, and there's a good reason to be there now and stay.
Wonderful. How are you able to balance life, work, the things you do outside, including tons of reading? I mean, all those books that you post that I see on
Yeah.
Facebook. This is the book I'm reading now. And I mean, you
Yep.
tons of reading. And also know that you're really involved. You talked about meditation. You're really involved with your synagogue. How are you able to balance everything?
I talked about Mr. Wheat teaching me about time management. There's some other mentors I had along the way too. I'm super duper organized. I put everything in my phone, in my calendar. I try to allow padding between things. If it's going to take 20 minutes to get from this to this, I put 40 minutes in because sometimes, as my dad used to say, you have to allow time for monkey business. What if you have to stop for gas? What if there's more traffic than you anticipated? I try to make notes on things I have to follow up on. There's something in my synagogue, speaking of which, that I have to follow up with two of my fellow members on. That's a reminder in my phone. I try to, what you said is very important. I think some people think your free life, your free time gets in the way of your career. I think they both help each other. I think if you work hard, you especially value your free time. And I think spending your free time well makes you enjoy your job more. I've usually been pretty good about a work-life balance. I schedule things out. I'll block it out and say, okay, I'm meditating between 11 and 11:45 on Saturday, or here's the time I'm going to read. I I also love people, so I try to stay in touch with the people I like and say, hey, we haven't met up in a while. How about a cup of coffee? I think you just have to be dedicated to both. You have to be dedicated to your career or your business, and you have to be dedicated to balance. And I truly think balance, I think they both feed the other. I have certainly met people in various aspects of my business who are workaholics. And I think sometimes they do great and then they burn out. And I feel like I could spend every free moment watching a television show or a movie, so I literally see everything that comes out. I think I'm better balanced for myself and for my clients, seeing plays, hiking, doing a few other things. I think being well-rounded is good.
I am a
Keeps you
huge,
healthy.
I learned in the Cutco industry, selling the knives that I'm a list person and I am old school. I put things on my phone and I have my calendar, but I have my, yellow pad that I make a list of things to do each week. And then if I don't get to something, it goes, to the top of the list for the next week. I have the book, this calendar, the old school
Oh, yeah,
calendars. Yeah.
yeah,
And so, and I have it in my phone then I keep everything back up. I have files like every podcast I've done. I have a file on every single person. And
right.
it's the same kind of thing. I learned it from, people that taught me when I was younger. And now I
Right.
know that a lot of times it takes up, twice as much time to have to write it down and everything. But I'm like, what if my computer crashes or what happens if everything, you know what I mean? I just have a backup, but that list thing and make sure you know, and stay, but time management is so important. And
And
if
it's not rocket science. It's usually just common
right,
sense. I had laundry to get done today. I figured out, so I put it in before this interview because laundry is something that can go while we're interviewing.
I used to teach my Cutco reps when I did training. I used to say there's 168 hours in a week. All right, let's
Right,
break it down. How many
right.
hours for this? How many? And we brought it all the way down to where I said, see, you have this many hours, even with sleep and work and play and all this different stuff to do the things that you want to do. It's just balancing and doing it. And it's a great line from the 1984 original Karate Kid, because the second one was not even close,
Right.
where Mr. Miyagi, when he gave Ralph Macchio that yellow convertible, And he
Right.
sat there and he goes, life, it's about balance. It's about
Mhm.
balance. And it comes back. I remember that line. I think I've posted it online before, and little motivational things like that. But you're so right. It's about balance and balance in your life. And it seems like obviously you're doing very well with it. And that never has surprised me.
And
Um,
it's all kind of very individual. One time when I was at Paradigm, they brought in as a guest speaker Mike Ovitz. Mike Ovitz helped build creative artists into the largest agency in the entertainment business. And I forgot what question led to this, but he said that at the height of their success, he said to their agents, there's 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. That's 21 opportunities to meet with buyers or clients. I would never dream of asking my colleagues to spend every meal a week on business. I think I'm more effective and they're more effective. Sometimes having a meal with their significant other, sometimes having a meal with a brother or a next door neighbor, or by themselves. You cannot work 24 hours a day endlessly. It's not good for your psyche. I just think it's counterproductive. I think you need balance. I truly believe I'm better at what I do because I do meditate a couple times a week. I do collect comic books. I am very involved in my synagogue. I do call my parents once a day. I try to spend a lot of time with Arlene. I think that it works for me.
and that's the most important thing. We talked on the phone briefly the other day, and I told you I remember when we were younger playing at your house on Gladeview here in
Yep.
Memphis as a little kid with those huge windows in the front. You told me your parents moved to California to be closer to you and your family. I believe that was in 2015. So your mom Sue turned 94 on February 16th, and your dad Bud 94 on May 23rd. That's amazing. I remember both of them well, and still can picture them in my mind from 30 years ago, what they look like, because I haven't seen them since, and
Yep.
how nice they were to me. What have your
That's
parents
great.
meant to you in your life?
Well, I missed the first part of
What
the
have your
question.
parents meant to you in your life, the impact they've
Oh
had?
gosh. I could go on for hours about this. I'm very fortunate. I always felt loved. That's number one. They always spent time with me. I'll tell you something that you don't know probably. When we were about 2 or 3 years old, my dad made a business trip to Chicago and he came back with a plastic model. It was a bird, it was a red-headed woodpecker, and we worked on it every night after dinner. After that, for the next 3 or 4 years, most nights after dinner and most mornings before we went to work, we would work on models. You might remember in my room on Gladeview Drive, there were plastic models on shelves. I thought everybody's dad did something like that. It was when I got to high school that I realized there are people who didn't have a dad, or the dad had to work 3 jobs, or both parents had to work multiple jobs, or some parents just chose not to do that. So that's the number one thing is both of them spent a lot of time with me. There might have been decisions I might have made differently in their cases, but they always certainly had my best interest at heart and wanted me to be the best person I could.
That's amazing. No, I didn't know that story. And now that you talk about the models, I can vaguely picture in my mind that on the walls of your
There were
room.
birds, there were dinosaurs, there were superheroes. Yeah, my dad and I probably made 50 or 60 models. Yeah, that
Wow.
was our big thing when I was younger. And then, as I got older, we'd do things like go on camping trips and stuff. He sometimes would chaperone for scout trips. And then as I became a teenager, of course, I was doing more stuff with my friends.
Right.
But but yeah, that's the thing. They made me feel loved and they spent a lot of time with me. And I'd like to think our daughter feels the same way.
Nothing like unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, like you said, you realize that when you got to high school, not everybody had that situation. And I was very fortunate. When my father passed away, my parents have been married 48 years. How many years have your parents been married now? It has to be what, 60s?
69, I think.
Wow. That's unreal.
Yeah.
That's,
Almost 3/4 of a century.
yeah, that's beyond amazing. So please
And
share
it
with
is
them. I said hello because they were just, like I said, such nice people to me, and I do remember them very well.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to see them actually in a couple hours. They live about 10 minutes from here. So we're going to have dinner with them. They make me laugh still too. When they were younger, they were obsessed with food being hot. We would go to restaurants and the food was never hot enough. What's funny to me is the place they live in now, we go to the dining room, and I think the food is A, not good, and B, not hot. And maybe they've just gotten older and aren't as sensitive to it, but they don't complain as much.
That's funny.
We used to joke in our family in the 1950s, they fought the Cold War. Now they fight the cold food, but maybe the battle's over.
It made me think of my dad cooking steaks out on the grill, out on the back patio and stuff like that. How the wonderful
Right.
times, at the dinner table and things like that. Those, I really missed the good old days, and they really were good old days.
They were. I mean, my house was sort of like Leave It to Beaver. My mom was primarily a homemaker, volunteered at school and synagogue, stuff like that. My dad went to a job in an office, came in with a briefcase. We sat down at dinner. He said, "Tell us about your day." Very
I,
Ward Cleaver.
yeah, I was watching a clip the other day. Airplane, such a classic, and Barbara
Oh gosh,
Billingsley,
yes.
when
Yes.
she was talking
The
jive,
jive scene.
it was so funny. I was watching that. They were like, "Oh, that could be made today." I'm like, uh, it should still be able to be made today. It's
A lot of
funny.
it could, but a lot of it could, not all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just it was such a funny scene, just because you would never expect that, out of Mrs. B, Mrs. Cleaver, exactly.
It was a great moment for her.
Yes, it definitely was. So
It's funny you're talking about seeing famous actors or stuff like that. There are two or three people that I've had a chance to have a conversation with that I regret. One of them was her. I one time went into a McDonald's in LA. This is when she's been gone for a while now. And she was there with two kids, probably her grandkids, just eating lunch. And I should have just gone over and said, "Hey, I just want you to know how much that show meant to me," but I was a little bit shy.
I've met a few. I remember in 1988 they were filming Great Balls of Fire here with Dennis
Yeah.
Quaid,
Yeah.
and he had the bleach blonde hair, and I was in line. There was a blues show at the New Daisy Theater on Beale Street, and
Uh-huh.
I remember I was in line, probably 30 in line, to get tickets, and I was with a mutual friend of ours. I won't mention his name. And we
Okay.
got in, and we're looking around because I saw Dennis Quaid walk through the line, and I saw a young lady with him. And I didn't know who it was at the time,
Right.
but I didn't see her face. And so we were looking around downstairs and didn't see him. And so we walk upstairs in the New Daisy. They had this small balcony upstairs, and he and Meg Ryan were dating at the time. She had just been 2 years earlier on Top Gun, and I went over and got the autograph from him. And so the person I'm with, and you would understand when we get off the air, stay on for just a second because I have to tell you who it is.
You got me curious.
The person I was with started trying to talk to him about this, that, and the other. And Dennis Quaid was so nice. He was like, Meg just got into town. We're sort of just hanging out and
Right.
chilling. It was a very subtle way of saying, "Hey, can you just, we gave you the autograph and blah, blah, blah. Could you get," and he was nice, never raised his voice, didn't say, "Hey, leave us alone, give us privacy." And my friend, our friend did not get that, subtle hint. And I just grabbed him. I said, "Hey, we got to go. Let's leave them alone." And we're walking away. And I just never forget Dennis Quaid winking at me, like sort of saying, "Thank you." But yeah,
Right.
that one little moment there sticks out in my mind when
Yeah,
you talk about
you have to be appropriate. I'm a big Beatles fan and specifically a George Harrison fan. I never got to meet George Harrison, but I was at the Emmy Awards about 12 years ago, and there's a documentary that his wife was one of the producers on about him that won or was nominated. And I saw her sitting at a table. And first of all, I was shocked I could walk right up. You would think a Beatle widow would have like
Yeah,
security guards who would pull me away, but I just walked up and said very quickly, "Hey, I don't want to disturb your meal. Just want you to know how much your husband's music meant to me." Especially, I mentioned a song called "Life Itself," which is not necessarily one of his better known songs, but was a spiritual song, meant a lot to me. And she said, "Thank you. I really like that one too." And I let her get back to her meal.
very nice. And that's a perfectly appropriate way to do it. So, Frank, tell us a little bit about your wife, Arlene, how you guys met, and your daughter, and,
Oh,
a little
sure.
bit more about your family.
Arlene and I met in 1993 or four. I was working for a TV movie producer. She was working for a company that did video duplication. She's originally from Salt Lake City, Utah. She worked in real estate most of her career. Now she uses the term retired. I say she's too young to say that. So I call her a philanthropist and socialite. Our daughter Danny is 20 years old. She's at Northeastern University in Boston, and she's very specific. She is majoring in American Sign Language interpretation. She's minoring in theater and ethics. She would like to be an ASL interpreter and would love to specialize in plays and concerts.
Wow,
Very
that is very
focused,
specific.
and they're both wonderful women.
That's wonderful. Is she going to come back is she going to go to New York, come back your way? What do you think?
She likes Boston a lot. Let's see. I think it's a little bit open right now. I certainly miss her a lot, but if she's gonna be far away, at least Boston's a really cool city. We
Yeah.
love visiting Boston.
What are the most important lessons that you've learned in your life?
Have compassion wherever possible. Use good judgment wherever possible. Try not to take yourself too seriously. Embrace people who are very different from you in all kinds of ways. One way in which I feel I'm very, very fortunate, I've always had lots of wonderful friends from the time you and I knew each other 3 years old. And now I've always been very, very fortunate. I have a lot of friends who I share things in common with. I have some who are very, very different. Many friends of mine, like you, are hardcore sports fans. I always say I know less about sports than most heterosexual males. It's just not something I've ever found particularly interesting. I have people who are in my life who have different political views than me, different passions, different interests. That makes it fun.
I like
I
that.
like when I do my hiking group, for example, we have people from all walks of life. We have people of different religious groups, people of different sexual orientations, people who are neurodivergent, people of all ages, people who I know through work, people who I know through other aspects of my life. It makes it fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you've probably heard the quote. It was said to me years ago, you could take what you do seriously, but try not to take yourself too seriously.
I keep working at that. I need to get better, but
Me too.
yes,
Me too.
yeah.
Once again, I want to thank the sponsors of Think Big with Michael Zellner, Buckley's Grill, which is located at 5355 Poplar Avenue in Memphis, right near the corner of Estate, and Roof and Nail, Kelly Potter's co-owner company, and they're located in Olive Branch, but they do work all over the Mid-South. You know, Frank, I knew when we were younger that, and this is not just saying this, that you were going to be successful in anything you wanted to do. And like I said, it took guts going and leaving Memphis at 18 to go all the way out to California. And you've always had that, what I call an it factor, in my opinion, that not only were you going to have success, but have a good and enjoyable life. And I can tell that you do. And I tell you, it was a lot of fun just doing research on somebody that I've known since 3 years old. I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts in the last year and a half, but I've known you the longest out of
Right.
anybody that I've done. And you know,
Yes. I was hoping I held the record.
yes, you do. And life always seems to get in the way. And with everybody, everybody has their stuff. And and people go their separate ways, and we don't get to see a lot of times the people that we grew up with. But one of the most important, and we talked about this, positive things about social media is that you get to see what's going on in your friends' lives and stay in contact this way. And I'm really appreciative of you coming on today, because this has been fun
You're
for me.
right. I mean, I was just I have a friend who actually I worked with the JCC when I was in high school. He's a bit older than we are. We write snail mail letters. Even now in 2024, we write snail mail letters. And he asked me the other day if I'm on social media because he is only just now joining Facebook. And I said, that's one thing I like about it is there's people I talk to regularly. And then there's a lot of people who, even if I don't talk to them, I'm happy to see they got a new job, they started a new podcast, they have a new pet, they have a new relationship. It's yeah, because the great thing about Facebook or Instagram is it does show you the tapestry of your life because I'll post a book I've read and the first comment is someone I went to day camp with, the next is my next door neighbor, the next is someone I worked with 3 years ago. And
Yeah.
also, you and I were talking about positive stuff. There were a couple of people when I joined Facebook that I was hesitant to reach out to. Um, we'd had friction, awkwardness, whatever word you want to use, either in high school or before that. And the three people I'm talking about all reached out to me, which was very touching because it means whatever mistakes I may have made, they're willing to look beyond. So I certainly can do the same.
And I look at Facebook and I have people just like you from all facets of life, from all the way back to preschool, like us, to Ridgeway Elementary, excuse me, in between there to Laurelwood, to Ridgeway Elementary, Ridgeway High School,
Right.
Cutco, people I know from when I owned a bar, and people from the furniture business. So every aspect of my life, there's people that are on my Facebook page. So it goes all the way, obviously, for many, many years. And it's wonderful that even though like high school reunions aren't as big anymore because of things like, you
Right.
know, Facebook and Instagram, because people get to see and don't, oh, I get to see him that way. They don't think it's important as important to go.
See, I'm different though. Most people would agree with that. I look at it that now I have more to talk with people about. It's like, oh, so and so, I know, she owns a dry cleaner, so it's not just, oh, hey, how have you been? But that's me. But you're
Yeah,
right. A
and
lot of people,
I'm the same way as you. Like when I went, we had to do a combination reunion with the class of '87, um, back for our 30th. And because we just didn't have a lot of people, and we only had like maybe 40 or 50 people between two classes and everything. So it's just like, but 10 years earlier, the 20, there was a lot. At the 10 year, there was a lot, but then social media changed it. But I'm the same way as you. In person makes it so much more better. So I agree with you 100%.
some people tell me too, and I find this fascinating, that there are people who don't go to the reunion because there's one person that annoyed them, and that person might be there.
Oh
If it's
gosh.
someone that did something really traumatic to you or bullied you or something, I get it. But if it's just someone you didn't care for, they may not show up.
Right.
And what if they do show up and there's 90 people you like? You can certainly focus. I don't know. That's how I approach it.
No, I 100% agree. I am going to let you end the podcast with two of your favorite words that you always like to say, or I am to me.
You created it, but okay.
Say it.
No, you.
Ji to she. I don't even remember. It's so funny is I don't even remember how that got created.
But I remember all of us said G at day camp one year. One year we were saying it constantly. We had a counselor. I don't remember his name. He had a beard. He played the guitar and he was strumming, going, "Don't say G." Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know how that started.
So anyway, every time I ever see it pop up, it makes me smile. So I do appreciate you doing that.
That's the other great thing about Facebook, inside jokes.
Right. Exactly. No one gets that if you put that on a comment or anything, but people that watch the podcast now will understand. But right. Several people I have inside jokes with, including you.
Great.
Frank, once again, thanks for coming on. And like I said, if you ever, when you get back to Memphis, please let me know, and we get together for lunch or
We're overdue.
something and catch up again.
I love it.
And stay on right after here because I have to tell you about the person. So thanks again for coming
I
on
want
today.
that person to join us for dinner. The person who embarrassed you at Dennis Quaid. I want him or her to be part of our dinner.
Sounds good. Thanks again.